Hello, everyone, and welcome to the February 2025 Global Innovation Institute webinar. I'm your host, Anthony Mills, Executive Director of Global Innovation Institute, and we're glad you're able to join us. As most of you know, GI&I is the world's leading professional certification, business accreditation, and membership organization in the world. We have authorized providers working with us all over the world. We have a number of new regional centers in South America, in Africa, in India, in Asia, that we're working to really expand the footprint. And so we're really glad to be able to engage with a global audience like this. And as most of you know, we do a monthly webinar series, and so this is our February 2025 event, and today is Thursday, February 13th, 2025. What I'd like to do now is to introduce our guest speaker to today and tell you a little bit about him and what he's going to be talking about. And after I introduce him, I will turn it back over to him. So our guest today is Mr. Stephen Shapiro. Stephen is a leading keynote speaker, author, and advisor on innovation, having developed a proven approach for increasing speed, reducing risk, and improving innovation ROI tenfold. Stephen turns heads, opens minds, and captivates audience with his provocative, results-focused content, which he has presented to audiences and organizations in over 50 countries. His work has been featured in such outlets as the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Newsweek, Success Magazine, CNBC, ABC News, TLC, and USA Network. Stephen started his work in innovation 25 years ago when he created and led a 20,000 person innovation practice for the consulting firm Accenture, where he worked for 15 years. Today, he's the author of 7 books on innovation. These include, amongst others, Personality Poker, Best Practices Are Stupid, one of my favorites, Invisible Solutions, and his latest, Pivotal, which he'll be talking about with us today. Stephen is also a senior research fellow with the Conference Board, and in 2015 he was inducted into the Speaker Hall of Fame. When he's not on stage speaking about innovation, he enjoys dabbling in magic and making the impossible possible. He's also a relatively good saxophone player from what I've seen. He's based in Orlando, Florida. So today Stephen's going to be talking to us about why, in addition to identifying what should change in our organizations, it's just as important to focus on what should remain the same. For this, he will introduce the concept of pivotal. Pivotal provides a powerful solution to the overwhelming chaos and relentless change facing organizations and individuals today. By focusing on what does not and should not change, you can establish a solid foundation for your organization. This focus allows you to channel resources for maximum impact, provide clear guidance to your team, and position yourself as indispensable to your customers. While the emphasis is often on what's next, sometimes the key lies in mastering what's now. It's time to innovate where you differentiate. And so with that, I will turn it over to Stephen. Join me now, if you will, in welcoming Mr. Stephen Shapiro. Stephen, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. Great to see many of you here. We're going to have a quick conversation around what shouldn't change inside of our organizations. But first, I want to do something a little different. I'm going to pull up some slides here. I'm going to put myself in the corner. And I want to and Anthony, I'm going to ask you your thoughts on this, but also I'd love others to put their answer to this in the chat. So the number 1 and the number 2 most popular sports in terms of fan base in the world are soccer, known in other places as football, and cricket. So the question then is, what is the 3rd most popular sport in the world? Is it baseball, basketball, American football, or ice hockey? Anthony, do you have a thought as to which one is the 3rd most popular sport in the world?
I really don't know, but my guess would be basketball.
You are correct. If we look at the numbers here, in fact, I was quite astonished at the numbers. 2.4 billion fans in basketball, whereas our other sports here, at least in the US, have a much smaller fan base. And here's the thing which is fascinating is our American sports aren't even in the top 5, 6, or 7. So Field hockey is actually number 4 after basketball. Tennis is number 5, and then volleyball is number 6. So I just thought this would be an interesting way to start our conversation, because the concept of pivotal comes from the world of basketball, the 3rd most popular sport. And I've had the great pleasure of working with our local NBA basketball team, the Orlando Magic. And the Orlando Magic, we're having a tough year because of some injuries. But one of the things I've always loved about basketball, and you can't tell by looking at me here on virtual, but I am a whopping 5 feet inches tall. I'm not sure how I would convert that into metric, but basically, I'm not a very tall guy. So I always thought basketball was a pretty interesting sport, but I was never good at it. So I decided, instead of playing basketball, I would consult to basketball teams and watch basketball. And so the reason why I bring this up is there's a move that's unique to basketball that's not in any other sport, and it is called a pivot. And basically what a pivot is if you're not familiar with it, you basically have a foot that is moving around in circles. And in business, we've used this term pivot to reflect a change in direction. So when the pandemic hit, about 5 years ago, well, we had to pivot. We had to change direction. People couldn't come to our restaurants. Okay, we need to figure out a way, how do we bring the food to them? People didn't want to go to hotels or fly on airplanes. How can we make it seem safer? We had supply chain issues. So we were constantly changing, and all the focus was on the change, on the shift. But here's the thing that most people don't think about when it comes to a pivot, is that in addition to the foot that's moving, and all eyes are focused on the foot that's moving, there is a foot that doesn't move. There's a foot that's planted to the ground. And if you don't have that foot planted to the ground, you don't actually have a pivot. And so we've spent all of our time in business focused on the moving foot. We don't spend enough time talking about the planted foot. And so I want to just talk about the difference between what it means to be pivoting versus pivotal. The first 5 letters of this are the same, but they actually have quite a bit of difference in meaning. So when we talk about pivoting, we typically mean, especially in business, we typically mean we're moving around in circles. Again, we're focused on that foot that moves. But to be pivotal, and in the introduction, Anthony, you talked about you didn't use the word irreplaceable, but it was something to that effect. That is ultimately what we want to be. To be pivotal is not about the movement. It is about the planted foot. It is about the foot that doesn't move. And so when you look at the word pivotal in a dictionary, the definition is it's of crucial importance, or it means you are irreplaceable. And that is ultimately what we're looking to do here, is create environments where we as organizations become irreplaceable to our customers. How do we do something that is so valuable that they have no choice but to do business with us? And part of that is to understand what doesn't change. So I'm going to give you a quote here from someone. Most of you may not know this person, but I thought I would use the quote anyway. It's Jeff Bezos. Okay, I think everybody knows Jeff Bezos. And I love this quote. This is from a Harvard Business Review interview. And basically, the paraphrase what he said is, he said, people outside of Amazon constantly ask me one question. It is, what's going to change in the next 5 to 10 years? He then continues in the article, and he says, but I very rarely get asked, and a more important question is, what's not going to change in the next 5 to 10 years? And then he continues to say that at Amazon, we're always trying to figure these things out because we can spin up these flywheels around these things, because all the energy that you invest in these things today will pay dividends 10 years from now. And so the key isn't always focusing on what's next or new, it's what's now. What do we focus on today that's going to have the greatest impact? And I'm going to give you what I think is the key to creating stability in a world of uncertainty. Right now, everything looks like an opportunity. We have AI, we have new technologies, we have challenges, whether it's going to be supply chain, inflation, still the remnants of the pandemic. all these things created some challenges for us in organizations. So we have opportunities and we have challenges. And so everything looks like an opportunity, but the reality is quite often things that look like opportunities are just distractions. So how can we distinguish distractions from opportunities? How can we distinguish the things we should focus on, where we should double down in our business, and what we should find maybe a different way of dealing with it? And my answer to that question is differentiation. Now, a lot of us have a lot of different feelings when we hear the word differentiation. For many, they look at this word and they say, differentiation, well, it's got in the word different. Isn't that what differentiation is? It is not. It is not about being different. It is about creating something of lasting value. So I want you just to think for a moment, how would you define differentiation? And just, I'm curious if anybody wants to put it in the chat. Anthony, I'll ask you, since you're here, how would you define differentiation? Like when you hear it, I mean, I already said maybe it's not just about being different. That might be part of it, but how would you define it?
Well, I think it as what makes you unique, what makes you different, or I shouldn't use a circular definition. What makes you unique from other people? What makes you stand out and is not like other people? Uniqueness.
Yeah, uniqueness, absolutely. And we have in here differentiation is about pursuing competitive advantage. I love that perspective. That is fantastic. We're going to dig a little deeper into differentiation. I'll give you one example of it right now. And then I'm going to sort of shift gears. Towards the end, I'll talk about how do you identify your differentiator. But I first want to just give you an example of it and then talk about the power of it in helping you get stability and clarity in your organization. So I'll pull this up a little larger so you can read this. This is a conversation I had with Robert Passon. Robert Passon is the CEO of a company called Radio Flyer. Now, here in the US, Radio Flyer is well known for their little red wagon. So you can see this wagon over here in the corner. They are like the original creators of these wagons. Back in 1917, Robert Passon is actually the grandson of the founder of the company. And so when you think about the business, most people would say they're in the wagon business. But what was fascinating is the conversations I had with Robert as he sort of explained his thinking on this. And I'll give you just some paraphrasing of it. So one thing which I love is when Robert talks to customers of Radio Flyer, he doesn't focus on the product. He doesn't ask, what do you like about the wagon or anything like that. What he does is he focuses on what does the brand mean. When people hear the word Radio Flyer, what does it mean to them? And what he always finds consistently all the time is that the first thing that happens when somebody hears the name Radio Flyer is they smile, especially if they had a Radio Flyer wagon as a kid. And then the next thing they always do is they share a story. And it's never about a wagon per se, but it's what their wagon represented. They will talk about how the wagon was a spaceship, or they have these memories of going through the yard with the smell of the grass. And they will have all, I was talking with somebody recently who their Radio Flyer wagon was so important to the family that it was where the Christmas tree went on during the holidays, and they would take it through the house and it would be decorated. So it was, for many people, the Radio Flyer wagon wasn't a wagon. It was this visceral experience. And so what Radio Flyer has done is they've realized they're not in the product business, they're not in the wagon business, they're in the memories business. And so they've articulated their purpose, their differentiator is that Radio Flyer exists to bring smiles and create warm memories that last a lifetime. And I love this perspective, and I want to just give you some, I'll leave this up over my shoulder for just a couple seconds as I tell a couple of stories here, because I think it's really fascinating. If you look at your organization, think about the implication of having this level of clarity. First of all, it's not a product. Wagons change. There are many less expensive wagons that you can buy out there. So it is not about the product, it is about the brand and what the brand represents. And so let's just talk about some very simple examples of how this comes into play inside their organization. So imagine you are a person working for Radio Flyer and you're in the call center and you're there to maybe take orders, or maybe you're dealing with problems that customers have. The goal of the call is, of course, to answer the question, to take the order, to deal with the issue. But when the person leaves the call, when the customer leaves that call with that customer service rep, the key thing is they need to leave with a warm memory of that call, a smile, something that has them say, wow, that was a great experience. Think about most of your experiences with call centers. That is not something you would normally say about any of them, but that is important to them. When they opened up their first store in Chicago, their first retail store, because they used to sell only through third parties. That store was designed, yes, to highlight the products, yes, to sell wagons and products, but it was also to bring warm memories and smiles that will last a lifetime. When people leave, whether they bought something or they didn't buy something, they want people to have this experience that they will say, that's such a great store, you have to go there. We didn't buy anything, but it was such an incredible store. And the reason why I use this example is because it gets at the essence, the heart of differentiation. Yes, they are different, but it is more than being different. It's not that they had a different product. It is something completely different. So one thing that differentiation is not, it is not a product or service. It is not an offering. It is not something you sell. It is going to be a capability. It is a capability that you possess inside your organization that allows you to create new products, new services, new offerings, and new experiences. And so when we look at differentiation, we need to get clear about what is it that we do that no one else does that's going to have the greatest impact and the greatest value on others. And sometimes we can leverage these capabilities in many different ways. So another example that I like is from Otis Elevator. Now, for the longest time, Otis Elevator was in the elevator business. They would manufacture elevators. They would manufacture the elevators, they would install the elevators, and then they were done and they were off to the next building. And then they realized that they're not experts in elevator manufacturing, they're experts in elevators. And so sometimes if you look at what you do, sometimes we can broaden it a little bit and it gives us new insights. And they realize, yes, we're experts in elevators, which means we don't just manufacture and install them, but we know everything about elevators. We can service them. And by the way, we can service elevators not just from Otis, but from any other brand or manufacturer. And so they launched a service division. And now when you look at the service division, it accounts for 57% of their sales and 80% of their operating profits. So when you start thinking about your business, I want you to just start thinking about what is it that you offer, a capability, again, not the service, not the product, but a capability you possess that can make you irreplaceable. So in the case of Otis, they are now servicing elevators from all manufacturers, all buildings, and it is incredibly profitable for them. But it was based on a capability, not a specific offering that they had. Their product wasn't elevators, it was an understanding, a deep understanding of all things elevators. And I'll just tell you, I use this in my business. One of the mistakes that a lot of times people make in my industry is I give speeches for a living. This is one of the things that I do is I'll get on stages. I was on one 2 days ago in Chicago. I'm gonna be on one in a couple days in Las Vegas. I travel the world giving speeches, typically in person. And so I could label myself as a speaker. The problem is, if I label myself as a speaker, I can only deliver and sell speeches. What I realized is my capability, and I have a number of different capabilities, but one of my capabilities is the fact that I have an understanding of the world of innovation. I've been in the innovation world for 30 years now. It started when I led that 20,000 person innovation practice at Accenture. So I have a deep, deep, deep understanding of all things innovation, not just speaking, but consulting, advising, workshops, So I've launched a number of offerings, just as Otis did, and these are now my most profitable offerings. I have a mastery program where we create, it's an apprenticeship program where we actually create people who are masters in a process. And the reason why I bring this up is think about your business. Think about the way that you can create more value for your customers by going deeper into your capabilities. It's not about creating something new, but it is about leveraging what you already do. So I'm going to give you a framework that is, I think, incredibly powerful. And to me, is sort of the essence of all this. If you're going to get stability, if you're going to figure out ways to focus on what doesn't change, and what doesn't change is your differentiator. It's the thing which makes you special. So for Radio Flyer, the thing that makes them special is they have a way of creating memories and smiles that last a lifetime. What is it that you do that no one else can do that will have a lasting impact, that if you were to double down and invest there would have the greatest impact? So I'm going to bring up a powerful framework. It looks simple, but don't be fooled by its simplicity. And it's called the Innovation Targeting Matrix. And the Innovation Targeting Matrix is a very simple concept, and it's built around the belief that all work we do falls into one of three different categories. And I'll give you those categories and I'll talk about what do we do with these. Now I want to be clear before I move forward with this. These are three categories of activities. These are not departments. These are not functions. These are work that people do. They are capabilities and abilities that people have inside of an organization. So we have, at the lowest level, support. When we talk about support capabilities, support activities, these are the ones that we do that create internal value, but they don't create value for our customers. They don't create external value. So payroll is, to me, the simplest, most obvious example. Unless you're a payroll company, it doesn't make sense to invest millions and millions and millions of dollars in creating the world's best payroll system. No, you want to find somebody else who already does it. So one of the strategies for something that is support is to outsource it. Find someone else who does it. Payroll, it's a relatively low-cost, high-volume business. Find somebody else who does it. Don't invest any time, money, or energy trying to create something special. No matter what you create, it's not going to create value. But of course, the first question you should always ask is, can we minimize it or even eliminate it? Meetings. Ask yourself, of the meetings you have in your business, how many of them are going to be truly valuable? Can we minimize the meetings? Can we eliminate certain meetings? Can we optimize those meetings in a way? I see someone put training and research in there. I'm actually going to come back to that in a moment because, again, these aren't departments or functions. These are things you do. These are activities. Training is actually a combination of all three. Sales is a combination of all three. Research is a combination of all three. There might be activities that are done within training that are support in nature, but there should be, and I'll give you actually an example from my work at Accenture, there should be work that you do in training that is also core and differentiating. So let's get to those next two levels, core and differentiating. And I'm going to give both of these to you right now because it's important for us to understand the distinction, because we tend to use them similarly. Core basically means these are the table stakes. These are the cost of entry. This is the cost of doing business. It's not the reason someone will do business with you, but if you get it wrong, they'll probably leave. These are the expectations of your customers. Everyone else in your industry probably offers this. So if you're in the hospitality industry, I've worked in the hotel industry for a long, long time with a number of major hotel chains. And core would be your reservation system. Core would be your Wi-Fi in the hotel. Core would be the fact that you have food in certain properties. Core might be the cleanliness of the room. People don't stay at your hotel if you were in the hotel business because you have a clean room. But if you're room is dirty, they will probably never stay there again. So the core isn't the reason why someone does business with you, but it will be the reason why someone leaves. So core activities, you want to, in some cases, partner. Find a third party who does this as their differentiator. I'll give you a quick example in a moment. You might want to use Six Sigma. You might want to use Lean. You might want to automate it. You might want to use proven practices. And I'm very careful, Anthony, not to say best practices because we know that best practices are stupid, according to my other book.
We'll use good practices. Good practices.
Yeah. Well, I say sometimes like maybe they're proven practices. They're proven practices in one company. Look, we could do a whole different conversation around best practices and why they aren't so best. And Anthony, thank you for putting in the chat the core of the table stakes of the cost of doing business. Yeah, it's the reason people will leave if you get it wrong. So being the best at it isn't going to attract customers, but getting it wrong is critical. So you want to optimize these. These have to be efficient, well-oiled machines. These have to be activities that you do incredibly well, almost always in partnership with someone else or through technology. And I am going to use this framework in a moment around specifically technology and specifically AI. So we'll dig into that. So the differentiators, as you alluded to in the beginning, Anthony, this is where you innovate. So you innovate where you differentiate. If this is the area of your business that has the greatest impact, it is the thing which others will have a difficult time replicating, something which the world needs, wants, and desires, and you can create the greatest amount of value with it, this is where you want to put your energies. And here's what's fascinating is when I go into organizations, one of the first things we'll do is we'll look at their investment portfolio. We'll look at their investment portfolio and we'll look at how much of their investments are in support, how much are in core, and how much are in differentiating. Now, for the moment, we're just going to ignore support because hopefully your organization is not putting a massive amount of money into creating custom payroll solutions or creating solutions that you could buy off the shelf, or maybe you shouldn't even be doing it at all. I think it was Drucker who said there's nothing worse than doing something well that shouldn't be done at all. So look, if you can get rid of it, just get rid of it. But when we get to the core and the differentiating, it becomes fascinating. The last 3 clients I worked with when we did this assessment, and this is consistent across all my clients, 80% to 90% of their investments are in core. If you were to go to each of the managers in your organization and ask them, what projects are you working on? In most cases, pretty much every client that I work with, 80 to 90%, in some cases more, are just core, which means that they're only putting 10% to 20% into areas that are differentiating. So the big shift, the big strategy that I have my clients look at is how can we take that 80%, take 20 percentage points of that 80 and do a partnership strategy, do an automation strategy, do something which can be done quickly, cheaply, and easily, move 20% there, which then means we're only 60% core, and we can now double this from 20% to 40%. And it is incredibly simple, yet incredibly powerful to start thinking about how do we shift our investments? How do we shift our investments? So I'm just going to pause here for a moment. This is what the matrix looks like in its beautiful, non-messy handwriting glory. I'm going to dig deeper into this. I will talk about the point about training and research in other departments. I will talk about partnership strategies, and I will talk about AI. And we're going to probably spend most of our time today. Normally, I don't spend this much time on this matrix, but for world-class innovators like that are on this call, I thought this might be more interesting than getting into the nuts and bolts of developing a differentiator. So Anthony, any questions that you have, anything in the chat, anybody pondering anything? I'm happy to dive into anything, or I can just keep on plowing ahead.
Why don't you keep plowing ahead? I mean, I do have a burning question, but I was going to save it to the end unless you want me to throw it in now.
Throw it in now. Why not?
All right, so here's the thing I struggle with, well, or I wonder. So a business, yes, they want to do what you're saying. They want to find the capability where they can differentiate so they can innovate that. But I fear that some businesses aren't really clear like where the right place to differentiate is. For example, let's do a hypothetical example. I run a company, we make electric vehicles, and where we differentiate is doggone it, we got the best audio system in that industry. Well, that might not be the most important thing to my customers. It's probably if they rank what's important to them in an electric vehicle, how good the audio system is probably down 20th on the list. But yet I'm saying that's where I'm going to differentiate. So I wonder if some businesses don't like pick the wrong place to differentiate. Any thoughts on that?
100%. Most of my clients, when they're looking at their differentiator, make a couple of big mistakes. The first mistake is that they choose a technology, a product, a service or offering. That's the first mistake they make. So they think, for example, I was working with one hotel chain that introduced this new reservation system. And I was working with the top leadership, and they were proud of this new reservation system. It did some really cool things that none of their competitors ever did. And so I did, when we were doing the work around differentiation, I asked them, what's your differentiator? And pretty much everybody in the room felt, yeah, this is our differentiator. It is what we do best. And I said, I guarantee you in 6 to 9 months, a competitor is going to come out with a competing product that's going to be equal or better. And I was spot on with my estimate. And then something that was a differentiator actually languished because they didn't put more energy into it. So absolutely. The second mistake that people make, so one is focusing on technology and things of that nature. The second thing, the mistake they make is they think that they, as an organization, can figure out their differentiator. So I was working with this one company, and they brought me in to help them go through the process of identifying their differentiator. In a moment, I'm going to sort of change direction so I can answer your question specifically with my 5 Ds of differentiation. And so, but what I did was I brought in, we had a team of about a dozen executives from this company. And then we brought in, and they wanted me to facilitate a conversation with those executives. I said, no, that's not the way it works. We need people outside the organization. We need your customers. We need your clients. We need partners. We need other people. And so we brought into the room, in addition to the executives, we brought in a consultant who knew that industry deeply, knew what all of their competitors were doing. We brought in some of their biggest customers. We brought in some of their biggest partners, people that they have relationships with. And the first part of the session would be the internal executives having a conversation around what they thought their differentiator was. And then when they were done, I said, great, let's ask everybody else. And I was watching the body language the entire time, and they missed the mark completely. I mean, some of the things weren't 100% off, but they really did miss the mark in terms of what their differentiator was. Because the problem is we make so many assumptions. We think something that we believe is valuable is what others value. So the second mistake that organizations make is they tried to do it on their own. They tried to do it only with internal thinking. And no, you need to be able, you need an independent, unbiased third party who will then work externally to aggregate, gather, and synthesize the information. So those are just a couple things. So let me pull up I'm going to do this one slide, and then I'm going to come back to you, Anthony, to make sure that maybe I've addressed or didn't address what you were asking. So normally I save this slide for like the very end, but I thought, you know what? You asked the question, let's just dive right in because we're not going to have time to get into any of these too much. But there are 5 Ds of differentiation. And this is just a framework, and I'm going to go through pretty quickly. Normally I tell a lot of stories before I unveil each of these, but I just want to sort of give you the broad brush perspective on it. So there's 5 Ds, which are in a couple of different dimensions. So the first 2 Ds are all around today. It's around today. What makes us differentiated today, right now? The first D is about being distinctive, which means we offer something that no one else offers. That's, when most people think about differentiated, they actually collapse it with distinctive. It's unique, it's different, nobody else does it. But the second thing is it has to also be desirable. And we need to get that right balance between it's different yet valuable. I mean, you'll notice I've got a lot of purple going on here. But Anthony, if I dyed my hair purple, do you think my clients are going to say, I have to hire Steve because he's got purple hair? He's different. No, no. They don't care. It doesn't create value for them. So that desirability is so important. And then there's also an external desirability and there's an internal desirability. Obviously, what you offer has to make good financial and work sense. So doing something that's valuable, but you don't have the capability to do it will burn people out. So we've got to get all these things balanced. But that's just today. That doesn't even tell you this is going to be desirable tomorrow. So that's where the next two Ds come into play, which is to say what we offer also needs to be durable. And what durable means is that it will remain distinctive. So I use the example of the reservation system for the hotel industry. It wasn't durable. Somebody could copy it. Somebody could replicate it. If somebody can take what you do and replicate it, maybe do it for less money, offer it for less money, or maybe offer a better version of it, that's not durable. And it doesn't keep you distinctive. So that's the next D, is making sure that what we offer is durable. And then the last one is, if we come back for a moment to the pivot like this, everything I've talked about so far, the first three Ds are the foot that doesn't move. It has to be distinctive, desirable, and durable, but we also have to make sure that it is dynamic, that at some point we do need to recognize the fact that the world does change. So dynamic basically means that we need to be prepared. Once we have the planted foot in place, now we can make shifts. So it's not about adaptability versus stability. It's stability first, then adaptability. Because now what you're doing is you're making movement and changes built on a stable foundation. Most organizations are spinning around out of control, getting dizzy, and it's not based on any level of stability, and therefore they get no long-term value from it, and they burn out the workforce. And then the last of the Ds is about leveraging your differentiator, and it means to be disseminated. And this is going to be, again, internally and externally. We'll come back to Radio Flyer for a moment. 100% of the people inside of Radio Flyer know their differentiator is not wagons. It is about creating smiles and memories that last a lifetime. Every person knows it. Every person lives it. It doesn't matter what somebody does. If they're cleaning the floors in the office, they know their job is to create smiles. So it has to be communicated internally. And then, of course, externally, it becomes really critical. One of the things that I think is really important is we innovate where we differentiate, but we should also sell where we differentiate. We spend way too much time. I've looked at presentations and sales packages and pitches that people have, and they spend way too much time on things that are core and not enough on things that are differentiating. So these are the 5 Ds, and if you use these in conjunction with the process I talked about, which is talking with people externally, current customers, past customers, people who are never customers, and you triangulate into this model, you get some level of clarity. So I'm going to pause here, turn it back over to you, Anthony. Questions, thoughts? I see maybe something in the chat.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. You did answer the question. I mean, I took two takeaways from that. Number one is the differentiators have to be defined externally by our customers and those outside of us. They give us that perspective on what truly differentiates us in the marketplace. And then number two is that our differentiators are tied to our capabilities. And so that essentially becomes an inherent part of who we are, fundamentally are. It's part of our capabilities. So that going to your durability and your the fourth D, I forgot what that was, the dynamic. We know that society and people, things change over time. So what that tells me is that organizations also need to be looking forward and thinking some things aren't going to change. First of all, like making smiles and memories, that's not going to change. That's some of these things are baked into human nature, and they're always going to be there. That's always going to be there. But then other things may change, and then so that raises the question: what new capabilities do we need to develop? What new differentiations might we need to pursue in the future? Is that also a valid question?
Absolutely, it is. And as much as possible, when you are using that dynamic perspective, when you are changing direction, you should still be ideally leveraging your existing capabilities. If you throw everything that you've done out the window, you're not going to have anything of value. So, one of the organizations that I worked with is I'll actually mention them since I mentioned them before. It's Philip Morris International. So they're in the tobacco industry. And for the longest time, like 98% of their revenues came from cigarettes. And they publicly announced that at some point in the future, they're going to be out of the cigarette business. Now, that's a huge shift, partly because they had to. The world changed. The desirability of cigarettes shifted. But people still want recreational experiences. And so what they've done is they've invested in recreational experiences, leveraging the capabilities they already have. So even though they came up with new products, in some respects, you could argue this is still leveraging their differentiator. For example, one of the things they developed is they invested about $4 billion in a product called IQOS, IQOS. And it is a device that's not so popular in the US, but in other countries. I've been in other countries where a lot of people use it. And the IQOS device is actually a device where you put a tobacco stick in it. So it's still tobacco. It's not a cigarette though, it's a tobacco stick, and it doesn't burn it, it heats it. And so what it will do is it will create the experience of smoking a cigarette without the ill effects. It is much safer than vaping even. And here, just a fascinating thing is I was doing work for Philip Morris in Budapest. And normally it's a no smoking room. It was at the Hilton in Budapest, and nobody was allowed to smoke in any of the hotels there. But Philip Morris got permission for everybody in the audience to use an IQOS device. And I'm not a big fan of cigarette smoke. So for me to speak in a room where 300 people are using, smoking would have been impossible. I couldn't smell a thing. Everybody's puffing away throughout the whole thing. I didn't smell anything. And when you talk to people, they had the same experience as smoking. And the reason why I bring this up is because, again, it leverages something that they already do, which is they just have to shift it. It's like, Otis, I'm not an elevator manufacturer. I have understanding of elevators. Well, how did Philip Morris shift? Well, they shifted away from being an expert in tobacco and in cigarettes in particular to really recognizing we're in the recreation business. And I think I saw a statistic, I think it's maybe now 30 to 40% of the revenues come from non-cigarette business already, which is pretty massive given the scale of an organization like that, and they're continuing to invest there. So long answer, but I thought that might be just something interesting for us to think about.
Yeah, and one other observation, and maybe this is more the case on B2C businesses than B2B, but it seems to me like a lot of these differentiators have a human emotion element to them. There's something emotional about them. Certainly, smiles and memories is emotional, and maybe it's the case that really good differentiators do have an emotional element. What are your thoughts on that?
I think most good differentiators are emotional in nature because emotions are much harder to shift. Think about branding. I mean, Tiffany has their blue box. That's pure emotion. I mean, they branded a color, yet people, when they see a gift with the blue box, it doesn't matter what's in the box. It's the blue box that mattered. There's an emotional trigger that gets created. And you could say pretty much the same thing. Why do people drink Coke over Pepsi or whatever? Yeah, maybe they like one over the other, but there's still a societal connection with it. I'm a Coke drinker, I'm a cat lover, I'm a dog lover, I'm a Pepsi lover, whatever it is. We create these emotional bonds with other people through the products that we use and consume. Yeah, I think that's probably a little more on the B2C side, but even on the B2B side, there are emotional elements that we can play to. So we don't have to.
I'm trying to think what Otis's emotional element would be,
Well, look, the emotional pain, if I'm in, I run a high-rise building, I've got an office building, the emotion that Otis will solve is basically, if the elevator doesn't work, it wreaks havoc. And so in many cases, the emotion is getting it right, making it work, dealing, because most people don't think about the cost of something not working. We talk a lot about solving problems, but not enough about preventing problems. And what B2B that we can do is we can prevent problems from happening, and that frees people up. But I'm going to give you a model here that is B2B, and I see something about value chain in there. This is a little bit of a value chain E type of thing, but I love this model, and this is specifically for B2B. And when we're done with this, I'll come back to this model and talk about the innovation targeting matrix for AI. But if you look at your business, if you're a B2B company, and this is your client or customer, I'll write client since it's fewer letters, what you need to do is you need to look at your differentiator, what you do best as an organization. So, for example, when I was working with people who are in the HVAC industry, heating and ventilation, air conditioning industry, and one of the things they were struggling is how do we sell to our clients, not homeowners, but to like the elevators, like these bigger buildings. And I said, first thing to do is to see if your differentiator can help remove the need for your client to do core work. So one of the mantras I like is, yes, you want to innovate where you differentiate, but you also want to see if you can help your clients and customers innovate where they differentiate. So to help them innovate where they differentiate, you first of all need to understand what is your client's differentiator, what is core and what is support for them. And if you can then put this model in front of them and say, here's all the things that you are doing that are core. These are the things that nobody cares about. You think that your ability to service the air conditioning quickly is going to make you stand out. No, you just need it done right. We do that. So we're going to take that core work off of your hands, which then allows you to focus on your differentiator. And maybe you might be able to take your differentiator and remove some of their support work. B2B might be, again, payroll would be down here. But this is, to me, a huge opportunity, is to understand your customers, your clients' core, and match your differentiator to that. Now, of course, at the highest level, if your differentiator can help their differentiator, that's incredibly powerful. But it's always good to start with your differentiator and their core. This is just a great way to think about how do you position your company in relation to your customers. And so when it comes time to pitching, and the reason why I mention this is, first of all, there is an emotional element to it. We're spending all of our time inside of our organization doing things that aren't differentiating. How do we do less of that? There's an emotional stress of people stretching themselves too thin, doing too much work. And if you could say, I'm going to help you get laser focus on what matters most, your differentiator, you focus your energies there, will take everything else off your plate. That's magical, and that's an emotional thing for them. So I think that's a pretty powerful concept here. So how does that sort of, any other questions come up from that, Anthony? What are your thoughts on that?
I think you're right. I mean, to me, absolutely, removing or reducing someone's stress has a ton of emotional value. It's a very emotional thing. So if I can say, and that's why we sell insurance. That's why insurance companies sell insurance. Like, it lets me sleep well at night. It reduces my stress level, right? And there's an emotional value to that. So absolutely, that makes sense. And I think you're right. Your tool there is, in a way, sort of a value chain analysis, looking at, in your case, differentiators versus core. And on my only comment, this is a great question, by the way, from Abraham. My only comment is, in doing the value chain analysis, the value has to be defined in the perspective of your customer, your client. It's like, what do they value? It's not what we value, it's what they value. And I love that tool, Stephen. If we can map our differentiator to their core or their differentiator, that absolutely makes sense. Another question I have, and by the way, for those in the audience, feel free to put more questions in the chat here, or if you even want to jump into the conversation, ask a question, feel free to do that. So give us your own questions here. Whoever wants to, feel free to put in a question. My next question, Stephen, is, can a market have a place where two competitors have the same differentiator? Can there be two radio flyers that are at the same time creating smiles and memories, and that's not hurting the market?
I would say sure. I mean, there's enough business, I think, for everyone out there. I would say as long as your differentiator is not just price, because if you're trying to be a commodity, well, then there's always somebody who's going to find a way of doing it for less and less and less and less.
Hmm.
So I would make sure that if you have a differentiator that is that emotional trigger that we were talking about, it is something which has an impact, sure. However, why would you want to? Why would you want to do what others are doing? Each company has something that's unique and special about them, and in my opinion. And so the more you can get in refining it, it doesn't mean you have to change it, but maybe you refine it, you tweak it, you get more specific with it. The more we do that, I think the better off we'll be. So you don't want people battling it out. It makes it a lot harder. For B2C, look, there's typically enough business, but B2B, I would argue, if you're going against a competitor, the quality of your pitch, the quality of your proposal, the quality of your message, it's sort of binary in B2B. I'm only gonna have one company that does payroll. I'm only gonna have one company that's my ERP system. I'm only gonna have one company that is going to do our branding and marketing or whatever it might be. And so I think getting it right really does make a difference.
Well, then I think there comes a point too where, you know, here is this broad space where my differentiator lives, but I have the opportunity to fine tune that through my marketing message a little bit, right? Or to reinforce it, and I think there's a lot of companies that have done this well. I think Apple's done this well over the years at different times. Is they understood the differentiator and they had a marketing message that really reinforced and emphasized that and fine tuned it. So I think we have an opportunity through marketing to really hone in on a certain point and fine tune that and emphasize that. Would you agree, or what's your thoughts?
100%. Again, and I want to make this clear. Your differentiator is not a department function, job role individual. It is every single person. So when you get your differentiator clarified, what you want to do is make sure your marketing materials, your hiring strategies, everything you do should be aligned with your differentiator. So when you look at HR, you might say, well, HR, that's a support function because they don't create value. No, that's not true. HR does some support activities, but they're the ones hiring the people who are going to deliver the work. And if they can get masterful at hiring the people who are going to help you differentiate, like when I was at Accenture, the people who are doing the recruiting and the training were incredible aspects of our differentiator. I would even argue that training was one of Accenture's biggest differentiators because we were able to have, back when I was with them, it was only 30, 40, 50, 60,000 people. Now there are like 10 billion people, whatever. I think there's like 1 million people. But every person understood the methodology, understood the language, understood how to deliver. That training work was a differentiator. It meant we could take people from any country, anywhere in the world, bring them together in the same project. We would speak the same language and we can hit the ground running. So don't confuse your differentiator as a department. Your differentiator is all departments, all functions, all people contributing to what matters most. One thing which I want to do just to make sure, because we've got only 7 minutes left, is I do want to talk about this in the context of AI. Just because everybody's talking about AI, and I just want to use the innovation targeting matrix real quickly. It's the same message that I gave before, but I just want to sort of clarify it. Is most organizations, when you talk with them and you ask them, what are you investing in? What do you think about? What are you playing with? Everybody's talking about AI. So AI is the bright, shiny object right now. And some people are excited about it. Some people are scared about it. It doesn't matter where you are on that spectrum. People are making investments in it. Now, here's the problem, is for 99% of the organizations out there, AI is not a differentiator. You might think it could be a differentiator. I promise you, it's not a differentiator. It is for almost every single organization, AI is core. It is table stakes. It is an expectation. Your customers are going to expect everything that you do and offer is enabled by AI. Now, if you spend all of your time, though, investing in AI like it is your differentiator, you're not going to be working on what matters most. I was doing some work with a healthcare system, and they're like, "We're investing in AI. We're going to become a differentiator in AI." I was like, "How can you become a differentiator in AI as a healthcare organization and still serve your patients, still work with the insurance company, still do all the things you need to do?" No, it is core. And for core, you partner, you use proven practices, you automate, but it does not become your primary form of investment. What you do, if we come back to that B2B model that I talked about, is you find someone who has AI as their differentiator. It could be an Accenture. They've invested billions in AI, and you partner with them. It could be a third-party software developer who embeds AI in their solutions. So if you, for example, I'm going to use payroll just because it's sort of the easy one. If you have a payroll system, your expectation of your vendors, your partners, your suppliers are that the solutions they are providing have AI and they're compliant and they're safe and they work properly. So now you don't have to put AI enablement into support because you're buying it. Same thing with your core solutions. Find vendors, find partners, find solution providers who have AI in their solutions, and now your core activities are AI enabled without you worrying about AI. And then when you start focusing on differentiation, now you can partner with the companies that can help you develop a custom strategy specifically for what you need for AI. So it's just, I think, really important for people to understand AI will never be a differentiator for 99% of the companies because the technology is changing too fast. And if you try to put all your energy in mastering AI, you will lose sight of what matters most and you will lose sight of your true differentiator. So I just thought that would be an important thing to probably end the session with. I know I see some other questions in the chat, but I just want to be aware of everybody's time at this point.
Yeah, and I think you answered Abraham's question there
Oh,
by
good.
pointing out that AI is an enabler to support your core. But again, I totally agree. I don't think AI is ever going to be, for most organizations, going to be your differentiator, because your differentiator is what really sets you up as unique and different to your customers and their perspective. Can
Yes,
I ask
yes.
one last question?
Of course. Yeah.
All right, and then we'll wrap it up. What is the relationship between differentiator and purpose?
Oh, I love that. I love that. I think they're closely related, but purpose is, I've got a buddy of mine who's coming out with a book I just wrote an endorsement for. It's called The Purpose of Purpose, and it's a beautiful book. And to me, purpose is more about your reason for existence. So if you use the Simon Sinek why type of thing.
Mhm.
And I know people say people don't buy what you do, they buy your why. And I don't believe that. I actually don't believe somebody cares about what your why is, what your internal motivation is. I mean, it might influence them at some level. They might be interested in it. But I don't care why Jeff Bezos created Amazon. I just want my products delivered to my house when I want them delivered to my house.
Yep.
Why he created it, irrelevant to me. So I think purpose, though, is sort of that internal compass that an organization has to make sure they're on the right path, which helps them make good decisions, because when they're off course, when they're off their path of their purpose, they can correct. The differentiator is really a strategy to help you understand the marketplace so that you can balance things that are aligned with your purpose, things that are aligned with the capabilities you possess, so that you can offer something. So I would argue one is maybe more internally focused and one is externally focused, but I do believe purpose and differentiator, when done together, are incredibly powerful.
I agree. And I think that's a wonderful note to end on. And so I just want to thank you so much, Mr. Steven Shapiro, my good friend, for your time and your wisdom and your insight, for sharing it with the community here. And for those in our audience, I want to thank you for those who are with us now, and for all those who will be watching the recording afterwards. I want to thank you for tuning into this webinar. And so with that, we'll say good day and goodbye to everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank
All
you.
right, thanks everyone. Thanks, Anthony.
All
Bye now.
right, take care.